My parents chose my brother's award ceremony over visiting me after a severe car crash. 2 weeks ago, they asked me to use my savings to bail him out of a fraud scandal. I refused. I, Vivian Cole, 32, was involved in a horrific car accident late one night while driving home from an emergency meeting at the hospital. We had been finalizing a critical update to our patient monitoring system, and I was exhausted but satisfied with our progress. That satisfaction turned to terror when another vehicle T-boned my car at an intersection, causing it to flip over multiple times. The paramedics later told me I was lucky to be alive. The irony wasn't lost on me. As a project manager developing healthcare systems, I'd spent years working to improve patient care, and now I was the one fighting for my life. The impact had caused internal bleeding, 2 fractured ribs, and severe damage to my left leg. Emergency surgery was required immediately. I spent the next week in the hospital, trying to recover both physically and mentally. The stark white walls of the hospital room felt suffocating, and all I wanted was to see my parents' faces. As someone who had dedicated her career to healthcare technology, being on the other side of the system was a surreal experience. But what made it worse was facing it alone. From the moment I regained consciousness, I expected my parents to rush to my side, even though I knew they wouldn't stay the entire time. They never did for anything involving me. Just a brief visit would have meant the world. Instead, days passed in complete silence. I waited and waited, checking my phone whenever I could move my arms without wincing in pain, but they never showed up. It took 4 days before I even received a text message from them. I knew the hospital had informed them. They were my emergency contacts, and the nurses confirmed they had reached out multiple times. In fact, they had managed to contact my parents within 24 hours of my admission. But according to the nursing staff, my parents seemed oddly dismissive about the whole situation. That stung deeply, but I tried to rationalize their behavior, telling myself they must be tied up with something important, or perhaps there was some misunderstanding. At the hospital, thankfully, my phone had survived the crash, along with my other belongings. I texted my parents every 5 to 6 hours, each message becoming increasingly desperate. Still, no response came. Every day in that hospital room felt like an endless nightmare. As a healthcare tech professional, I understood the clinical side of recovery, but nothing had prepared me for the emotional toll of being abandoned by my own family. I kept making excuses for them, desperately wanting to see any familiar face. The isolation became harder to bear with each passing hour. Eventually, I found a small relief when my friends from other states managed to contact some of our extended family living nearby. On my 6th day in the hospital, my father's cousin dropped by for a visit. During our conversation, she casually mentioned how wonderful it was that my brother Max was receiving recognition at a prestigious banking industry awards ceremony. I stared at her blankly, having no idea what she was talking about. She seemed confused by my confusion. Then her expression shifted to something that looked like pity. The truth revealed. That's when the truth hit me like a second car crash. My parents hadn't come to see me because they were attending Maxwell's award ceremony. They knew I was in the hospital, fighting for my life after emergency surgery, but they chose to celebrate my brother's moment instead. They had been so busy preparing for his big day that they couldn't even send a proper text message. The thought that they prioritized a corporate award ceremony over their daughter's brush with death made my monitors beep as my heart rate spiked. Let me be clear before anyone suggests I'm jealous of my brother. I understand why they're proud of Max. He's undeniably talented and has worked hard to become a vice president at his investment bank by 35. But he's always been the golden child, and that's the real issue. Since childhood, he's received endless praise for every achievement while I've been pushed into the background. Even now, with my own accomplishments in medical systems development and multiple industry recognitions, Nothing I do seems to matter to them. This award was obviously important to him, but I was literally recovering from life-saving surgery. Would it have killed them to at least make a quick phone call to check if I was still alive? That's all I wanted. Just the bare minimum of parental concern. The fact that they couldn't even give me that when I quite literally could have died that day spoke volumes about where I stood in their priorities. The confrontation, the mixture of anger and humiliation was overwhelming. I tried to rationalize their behavior, but my analytical mind, the same one that helped me design complex healthcare systems, couldn't compute their cold indifference. Finally, I decided to confront them directly. I sent a message expressing my disbelief at their choice to prioritize Max's award over my critical condition. I detailed how deeply hurt I was by their complete lack of concern. Their response came quickly, for the first time since the accident, and honestly, I wish they hadn't replied at all. Their words only twisted the knife deeper. They started by defending their decision, claiming they couldn't miss Maxwell's award ceremony because it was a once-in-a-lifetime achievement in investment banking. When I pointed out that they could have easily visited me earlier and still attended his ceremony, they dropped their defensive stance. Instead, they delivered a blow that hurt more than my physical injuries. They told me it would have been pointless to waste time visiting me when my brother was out there, making the family proud. Their words hit harder than the car that T-boned me. As I lay there, surrounded by medical equipment similar to the systems I helped develop, the irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent years making healthcare more efficient and accessible, yet I couldn't access basic emotional support from my own parents. Childhood memories. I wish I could say their behavior shocked me, but this pattern was as familiar as the hospital protocols I worked with daily. Max was the perfect child. Every move he made was celebrated. Every achievement, from scholarships to his fancy little VIP position, was treated like a national holiday. Meanwhile, I was consistently relegated to the sidelines, despite my own successes in healthcare technology. Even when I received recognition for developing systems that literally saved lives, it was never enough. Every minor setback I encountered was treated like a catastrophic failure, and I never received the same level of support. It felt like they had predetermined I was the family disappointment, and nothing, not even my contributions to medical technology, could change their minds. The hospital visit. A week after Max's award ceremony, my parents finally appeared at my hospital room. Their sudden visit confused me, as I had given up trying to contact them after our last conversation. After years in project management, I'd learned to read people well, and I could tell they weren't here out of genuine concern. They arrived with artificial smiles and a hastily purchased bouquet from the hospital gift shop. I recognized it, as I'd passed that shop countless times during my system implementations. They made awkward attempts at small talk about my condition, but their minds were clearly elsewhere. The tension in the room was palpable, reminding me of critical system deployment days when everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop. I finally told them to just say whatever was weighing on them. Their obvious distraction was more insulting than their absence had been. I didn't need their performative sympathy. The real reason, I didn't have to wait long. My mother burst into tears, revealing that Maxwell had been arrested for fraud at his investment bank. The golden child's shine had finally tarnished. It turned out that Max was at the center of a massive fraud scheme discovered by his company. He had been falsifying accounts and diverting funds into personal investments, the very opposite of the ethical financial management I strived for in my healthcare systems. Following an internal investigation triggered by a whistleblower, everything had been handed over to the authorities. Now he was facing serious charges including wire fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. My parents had already depleted much of their savings on legal fees, and they came to me because they didn't have enough left for his bail. They wanted me to use my savings, carefully accumulated from years of hard work in healthcare technology development, to help him out. They even had the audacity to ask if I knew anyone who could pull some strings. The realization hit me. I wasn't their daughter seeking medical attention. I was just a potential solution to Max's problems. As someone who had dedicated her career to improving healthcare systems, being reduced to a mere backup plan was particularly bitter. The internal struggle, the physical and emotional pain continued to wash over me in waves. As I lay there, surrounded by the same medical monitoring equipment I helped modernize, I couldn't believe they were asking me for help after everything. It felt like a cruel joke. When I was lying here post-surgery, scared and alone, they couldn't spare a moment. But now that their precious little VP son was in trouble, suddenly I was worth visiting. Part of me felt guilty, the same part that always pushed me to improve healthcare systems to help others. Maybe I should help for the sake of family harmony. But another part of me, the part that had endured years of being overlooked, was seething. Why should I rescue my brother? Max, who had everything handed to him on a silver platter, who never faced consequences because our parents always shielded him. Now they expected me to join their pattern of enabling his behavior. The decision. I told them firmly that I wouldn't help. Making my voice as steady as the vital signs displayed on my monitor, I explained that even if I had spare money beyond my emergency fund and healthcare innovation investments, I wouldn't feel obligated to bail him out. I reminded them how they had made their priorities crystal clear when they couldn't even visit their critically injured daughter. They accused me of being selfish, insisting that family should stick together. Even as they said I would regret not helping my brother, I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. The truth was, Max had always been their priority. No matter how many healthcare systems I successfully implemented, no matter how many patients' lives my work improved, I was never enough for them. They expected me to simply forget all the times they dismissed my achievements, excluded me from family celebrations, and made me feel insignificant. But now, for the first time in my life, I felt in control. Just as I commanded respect in my professional role, managing critical healthcare projects, I was finally standing up for myself in my personal life. This power shift was something I intended to maintain. Present moment. I'm still in my hospital bed, my medical monitors steadily beeping as I process a mixture of anger and lingering doubt about my refusal. My parents haven't spoken to me since, and while I know they're upset, I find myself increasingly at peace with my decision. I'm done seeking their approval. I've wasted too many years of my life on that futile pursuit, time I could have spent focusing more on my healthcare innovations and personal growth. They keep repeating that family should always stick together after I stood up to them, making me question if I'm the villain in this story. But I can't get past their treatment of me throughout my life, especially during this critical medical emergency. Every time I look at my vital signs monitor, similar to the ones my team has worked to improve, I'm reminded of how they left me alone during my most vulnerable moment. First update. Hello everyone. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for your support of my initial post. Your encouragement helped me maintain my stance. While I hadn't planned on updating so soon, a lot has happened since then. I was finally discharged from the hospital a few days after my parents' visit. Walking is still a challenge, with my fractured leg requiring crutches, and breathing remains difficult as my ribs heal. The irony of being dependent on medical equipment similar to what I helped develop isn't lost on me. I was looking forward to returning to my condo, finding some peace, and escaping the drama. That hope shattered the moment I spotted my parents waiting outside my door. They must have called the hospital to learn my exact discharge time, as I hadn't told them. With the same ruthless efficiency they'd shown in supporting Max's career, they launched into their assault before I could even grab my keys. They were furious, declaring that my refusal to help my brother was a step too far. It was the angriest I'd ever seen them, more upset about my refusal to bail out Max than they were about his actual crimes. The confrontation at home. They launched into an endless tirade about how family should always come first. The words selfish and vindictive echoed through my building's hallway. According to them, I was using this situation to exact revenge because I harbored resentment toward Max. The fact that I was barely a week out from a near-death experience seemed irrelevant to them. In their eyes, I was simply an obstacle preventing their beloved son's rescue. Then came their most audacious statement yet. They said this was my opportunity to prove I wasn't a disappointment, that I could finally be part of the family by helping Max. The absurdity of it struck me like a physical blow. They were essentially admitting I wasn't really family to them, and that supporting my fraudulent brother was my only path to acceptance. The breaking point. The situation deteriorated when I firmly refused again. My mother broke down in the hallway, her sobs echoing as she wailed, "We've already lost one child, and now we're going to lose two, and you're punishing us for loving him more." Meanwhile, my father abandoned any pretense of guilt-tripping and turned to pure anger. He repeatedly called me cold-hearted and selfish, insisting I had no regard for family, and that I would regret this once they were gone. Standing there on my crutches, exhausted from my hospital stay, I struggled to maintain my composure. Here I was, being told I was a terrible person for not cleaning up my brother's mess, while still recovering from injuries that they had completely ignored. Their blatant admission of loving Max more only crystallized what I had known my entire life. But I stood my ground. I warned them that I would call security if they didn't leave, and repeated that I wouldn't contribute a single dollar to his bail or legal fees. They finally backed off, but not without hurling more insults my way. The scandal unfolds. A few days after that doorstep confrontation, my brother's case made headlines. The fraud scheme was far more extensive than initially believed. Police discovered evidence that Max had been diverting company funds for over a year, laundering money through shell companies in his name. The investigation revealed he had also helped several colleagues hide their embezzled funds. Now, in addition to fraud, my brother faces charges of conspiracy and money laundering. If convicted, he could spend significant time in prison. The aftermath. The fallout has been devastating for my parents' carefully constructed image of our perfect family. They're completely unraveled. After years of bragging about Max's achievements in investment banking to everyone they knew, his reputation has been utterly destroyed. As news spread about their little VP son being embroiled in a major fraud case, their attempts to control the narrative by claiming it's all a misunderstanding fell flat. My father even lost a significant client from his real estate development firm. They're floundering, clearly out of their depth, when they can't buy or manipulate their way out of a situation. Another desperate attempt. Predictably, they came crawling back to me. This time, they didn't even try to mask their desperation. They claimed they needed my help just this once to get through this overwhelming stress. In their words, if I helped Max, they would have a chance to fix things and keep the family together. But my years in healthcare system development had taught me to see through euphemisms. Keeping the family together meant preserving the facade that their golden child had done nothing wrong, and fixing things meant covering up his crimes. After I refused once again, they've gone completely silent. No texts, no calls, nothing. They seem to have finally given up on me. I imagine they see me as their ultimate failure, the daughter who abandoned the family when they needed her most. But do you know what? For the first time in my life, I truly don't care. Finding freedom. I feel in control for the first time ever. While it hurts to confirm that my parents only saw me as a backup plan, someone to leverage when things went wrong, it's also incredibly liberating to finally put myself first and refuse to enable their toxic behavior. I won't help my brother, and I won't let them manipulate me into fixing a situation they created through years of preferential treatment. They need to face the consequences of their choices, just as I've had to face the consequences of their neglect throughout my life. Second update: the brother's plea. Since many have been asking about my situation, things have actually become more complicated. I received an email from Max, as he doesn't have phone access while in custody. He convinced a colleague who still believes in his innocence to reach out to me. Initially, I was tempted to delete it without reading my instincts, as a project's manager warned me it was likely another manipulation attempt. However, my curiosity won out, and I opened it. In his email, Max claimed he was being framed. While he admitted to participating in the fraud scheme at his company, he insisted he wasn't the mastermind. According to him, senior executives had used him as a scapegoat to cover their own tracks. He claimed that while he was trapped taking the fall, certain powerful executives were still walking free. He pleaded for my help. Not for our parents' sake, he said, but because he believed I was the only one who could prevent our family from completely falling apart. That last line particularly stung. Perhaps because Max finally acknowledged how toxic our parents had been. He admitted they had consistently mistreated me while using him to feed their own egos. It was strange seeing him acknowledge this, as he had always complied with their dynamic. Yet, having spent years analyzing complex systems and user behaviors in my work, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was just saying whatever he thought would convince me to help. The investigation. Despite my promise to myself to be done with all this, I kept questioning whether there was any truth to his claims. As someone who regularly deals with system audits and compliance, I needed to know for certain. I consulted a lawyer friend I trust from my healthcare technology network. While they couldn't provide a complete legal analysis since they weren't involved in the case, they guided me toward helpful resources. After some research, I discovered Max's story wasn't entirely false. He was undeniably guilty of fraud, but based on my investigation, it appeared he wasn't the puppet master. The fraud scheme had multiple victims, and Max, with his access to certain accounts, was used as the fall guy when things unraveled. The senior executives had deliberately distanced themselves from the operational details, leaving my brother to take the blame. Internal conflict. Learning all this left me with conflicted feelings. As someone who develops systems to protect patient data integrity, I was appalled that he participated in something so unethical. Regardless of whether he was the mastermind or just a pawn, he had actively participated in serious financial crimes. He wasn't an innocent bystander who accidentally got caught up in something. He made conscious decisions to participate, likely believing his position and our parents' influence would protect him forever. Yet I felt a twinge of sympathy, knowing he had been exploited by those with more power and experience in covering their tracks. The senior executives clearly knew what they were doing, ensuring my brother would bear the brunt of any fallout. I couldn't help but wonder how different things might have been if he hadn't been raised in an environment that praised appearances over integrity. After watching our parents solve every problem with money or connections, he probably thought he was untouchable. Parents' reaction. When I shared my findings with my parents, they were unusually quiet. Though they wouldn't admit it, I think they finally realized Max wasn't an innocent victim. Yet instead of acknowledging reality, they stuck to their same narrative, that I was selfish for not putting family first, and heartless for not helping him. Trying to reason with them was like debugging a system with corrupted core files, pointless and frustrating. Moving forward, I've decided to cease all communication with them for now. Like finalizing a major system deployment, I've made my decision, and I'm sticking to it. Regardless of how much Max wants to blame the executives, he still made his own choices, and now has to face the consequences. If my parents want to continue enabling him, that's their choice. But I won't destroy myself trying to help someone who wouldn't do the same for me. To be honest, I haven't felt this much clarity in years. Even though my family will never see it this way, I know I made the right decision. I've been treated like a backup server for far too long, only noticed when they need something. While Max's situation is unfortunate, I'm not responsible for fixing it. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has supported me through this. While it hasn't been easy, it's been incredibly comforting to know I'm not alone in these feelings. Third update, 1 month later. I now have enough information to provide an update, though it's been over a month since my last post. Being a project manager has taught me to wait for complete information before making announcements. And now I can share what's happened with my parents' latest tactics. When they realized that neither guilt tripping nor begging would work, they switched strategies. They decided to try making my life even more miserable by attempting to destroy my reputation, something that could have seriously impacted my career in healthcare technology. They contacted various aunts, uncles, and cousins to express their disgust at my selfishness for not helping Max. They painted a picture that my refusal was purely out of spite, implying I was sitting on a fortune while my brother suffered. They portrayed me as some heartless monster who couldn't be trusted, conveniently omitting how they'd abandoned me in the hospital and only contacted me when they needed financial help. The family response. Initially, this hurt deeply. Even after standing my ground, it felt like I was being punished again. Having built my career on establishing trust and reliability in healthcare systems, the thought of my reputation being damaged was particularly painful. I feared I would be left completely isolated, without any support system. However, something unexpected happened. Instead of backing my parents, several distant relatives started reaching out to me. It turned out my parents' obsession with Max and their treatment of others had soured many family relationships over the years. I had no idea how deep this went until I started hearing stories from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, each more shocking than the last. The truth emerges. An aunt revealed that Max had once borrowed a substantial sum from her husband for a guaranteed investment opportunity. Predictably, the venture failed, and when my aunt tried to recover their money, my parents cut all ties with her and spread rumors about her being greedy and unsupportive of family. A cousin shared how Max had blamed a parking attendant for my uncle's car accident at a family gathering years ago. My parents covered it up to protect the family's reputation and accused my uncle of trying to slander Max when he confronted them about it. Another relative described how my parents sabotaged a business partnership between Max and another family member because they deemed the relative not prestigious enough to be associated with their son. The revelation. Learning all this was both shocking and validating. As someone who works with data verification in healthcare systems, I finally had concrete proof that I wasn't crazy. My parents truly did have a long history of dismissing others and using Max as their golden shield. For years, I'd believed I was somehow defective, that I wasn't good enough or didn't meet their standards. Now I realize it was never about me. They were constantly focused on protecting Max at any cost, even if it meant alienating family members who questioned them or stood in their way. Financial context. For those wondering why my parents were so desperate for my help, the truth is, I've built a solid life for myself despite their lack of support. As a projects manager for a leading healthcare systems company, I've made smart financial decisions, saved carefully, and made wise investments. My parents knew about my financial stability, which is why they were so frantic. What they failed to understand was that having the means to help doesn't create an obligation to do so, especially not for people who've treated me as an afterthought my entire life. Case resolution. There's been an update on Max's legal situation. After I refused to bail him out, my parents eventually scraped together enough money from loans and favors to get him released. However, the investigation was far from over. A few weeks ago, Max decided to cooperate with authorities. From what I understand, He provided information about the senior executives involved in the fraud, which helped advance the prosecution's case. His cooperation earned him a lighter sentence, 1 year plus community service instead of the potential decades in prison. Honestly, this doesn't make me feel any better. While I appreciate his cooperation, it doesn't change the fact that he initially chose to participate in the scheme. Moreover, I doubt this experience will fundamentally change my brother. He'll likely continue letting our parents clean up his messes. New beginnings. I've made the decision to permanently cut contact with my parents, something I probably should have done years ago. They're blocked on all my communication channels, and I've instructed my building's security to deny them entry if they show up unannounced. Just as I ensure the integrity of my healthcare systems, I need to protect my own well-being. I'm tired of being their fallback option, scapegoat, or emotional punching bag. Surprisingly, I'm not devastated by this decision. I had assumed cutting off family would feel like a massive loss, but instead, it feels liberating. I can now live my life without constantly comparing myself to Max or begging for scraps of affection from people who would never give it. The relatives who reached out have been incredible. They've shown me I'm not alone, and for the first time in ages, I feel supported. Ironically, after years of my parents excluding me, I've suddenly found my real family. I'm actually excited about getting to know these relatives better. Many have invited me to family events where my parents won't be present. One aunt even expressed regret for not seeing the situation sooner, saying she always felt something was wrong with how my parents treated me, but stayed quiet to avoid conflict. She's now one of my strongest supporters, along with several other family members. Epilogue. While I don't know what the future holds, I feel hopeful for the first time in years. Working in healthcare technology has taught me that sometimes you need to completely rebuild a system rather than trying to patch broken code. Thank you all for your support and guidance throughout this journey. Reading your comments helped me realize I wasn't crazy for standing up for myself. Though it hasn't been easy, it feels incredible to finally be in control of my own life's program.